I want to bring that point up with you, Mohammed, because again, there is this question. This is a joint operation that was initiated by Israel with that first attack. But in terms of what Paul was just describing there, if there is this sort of this phrase about what the end game is as far as the US is concerned, Benjamin Netanyahu has been extremely clear about what he intends for Iran. So what's your assessment of the kind of dynamic, if you like, between the way the US is doing this compared to the way that Israel is doing this?
Well, what I would say is that Benjamin Netanyahu has been getting his way for the most part with Donald Trump for 14 months, and I think we're seeing more of that now with this attack on Iran. I thought it was interesting yesterday what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said. He essentially acknowledged, he admitted that Israel had sort of twisted America's arm to get into this war. They sort of forced the American hand, if you will. And I thought that was an absolutely stunning admission from a U.S. Secretary of State. And now this is becoming a real crisis for the Trump administration. Because Donald Trump is very plugged into social media. Undoubtedly, he's seeing all the criticism that he's getting, not from Democrats, but from MAGA Republicans. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Matt Walsh, the Hoge twins, Megyn Kelly, all of these people that I just mentioned have millions of social media followers. Even Nick Fuentes, the popular white nationalist and a MAGA, America First Republican, went to his social media platform yesterday and encouraged Republicans to vote Democrat in the upcoming midterm elections. So this is becoming a crisis. Trump is aware of this. He's seeing the opinion polling data showing that only 27% of Americans support the war policy and that 55% of Republicans support the policy, only 55%, which is a very low figure. George Bush had 93% Republican support for the war, the invasion of Iraq in 2003, for instance. So I think that, to Paul's point, I think that the administration is kind of flying by the seat of its pants a little bit and trying to adjust to what Israel has pushed them into.
I want to bring in Robert Pape. He's a professor of political science at the University of Chicago. He's the author of The Escalation Trap on the online platform Substack. He's joining us now from Chicago. It's really good to have you with us in Al Jazeera. Thank you very much indeed. The bulk of the combat that we're seeing so far, particularly on the side of Israel and the US, is driven by air power, as well as, of course, backed up by missiles and so on. If the ultimate goal is regime change, is that the most effective way of managing to do it without actually having to put boots on the ground?
President Trump is up against the weight of history, not just simply Iran. For over a century, states have been trying to topple regimes with air power alone. Over a century. And it has never, using my words carefully, never worked. What you are seeing play out in real time is the escalation trap. That's why I started this Substack just early a week before the bombing, because this is fully predictable. It's unfolding exactly in the stages I lay out. And you are seeing that the war is now widening, and this is all fully predictable.
Paul, I want to come back to you because in terms of France, Donald Trump has already said, and our correspondent Kimberly Halker was referring to it earlier, he was suggesting that the Iranian leadership had been in charge with him and they wanted to talk, but it was far too late. And the head of Iran's national security has been refuting media reports, saying, we never intended to talk in the first place. We're not going to talk to the US. Is there a sense that there is a genuine disinclination to have any talks at the moment, given what's going on? Or is it also the case that neither side wants to be seen to be making that first step?
I think that you've got it exactly right. It is too early for either side to begin serious negotiations in public. And we should always remember that we don't know what's happening in back channels. There can be other means of communication, other ways that you can keep lines open. One complication here is that the Iranian leadership has been decapitated, and we've seen further moves to preserve that decapitation which makes it literally hard to conduct negotiations, both in the sense that there may not be anybody with operational or political control to negotiate with, but also in the sense that every time you have a strike like that, it is harder for the other side to give in or make concessions because it looks like they were pushed. The Trump administration can't back away from this war now, having just begun it, because they are invested, at least for a little while. And now the Iranians can't give in because they've just suffered a severe deterrent failure because we're in a war that presumably in Iran wanted, and they have to be shown to be at least credible enough that a little while, if negotiations do take place, it doesn't look like they were pushed or that they lost.
I want to come back to you, Robert, if you don't mind, because you mentioned a phrase there, the escalation trap, and I'm really interested in that because to me, it sounds like there are many different elements that could cause that to happen. Can you just dig in a little bit more about what you mean about, and particularly in relation to this circumstance, how you see that may apply?
Of course. Yes, of course. Stage one is where the smart bombs are near 100% tactically successful. You kill the leader in this case. Stage two is where you don't actually succeed strategically. And that's what you're seeing. Iran is now fully capable of retaliation and continued retaliation. Yes, dispersed, but nonetheless very, very powerful. I'm sure tourism is dropping like a rock across the Persian Gulf, which is surely the intended aim of many of these strikes. And moreover, the supreme leader being killed means that a threshold has been crossed where politics has now changed inside of Iran, changed inside of the regime. It's no longer the same regime. It's a regime much more willing to take risk, much more, the society much more willing to bear risk. And so what you are seeing is we are in now stage two of the escalation trap, and Iran now is more and more in control of escalation than the United States.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you all. I want to thank Robert Pape in Chicago, Mohammed Al-Masri, of course, and Paul Musgrave as well for your expertise. Thank you very much indeed. I'm Rob Matheson with Al Jazeera's continuing coverage of the conflict between the US, Israel, and Iran. Israel's military has issued more forced evacuation orders for areas in Tehran. The Iranian capital has been bombarded continuously by a joint US-Israeli offensive. At least 787 people have been killed across Iran since Saturday. Iran's been retaliating with drone and missile strikes hitting Gulf states. One of the latest attacks was at Fujairah port in the United Arab Emirates. Iran has carried out more than 1,700 strikes across the Middle East in 4 days. And 2 drones struck the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia's capital, Riyadh. The defense ministry said a small fire broke out and the building sustained minor damages. The U.S. State Department ordered non-emergency government personnel and their families to leave Saudi Arabia, as well as Jordan, Iraq, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, and Kuwait. And there's no let up in Israel's attacks on the Lebanese capital, Beirut. The military says it's destroying Hezbollah command centers and weapons storage facilities. Israel's defense ministers authorized troops to take control of additional positions in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah says it's downed an Israeli drone in that area. John Bolton is a former U.S. National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump in his first term. He says Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants regime change in Iran, and the U.S. is assisting them.
That it's Trump behaving like Trump. This is what he does. He doesn't have a strategy. He doesn't have a philosophy. He doesn't do policy the way anybody listening to this program understands the word. And I think it's a political problem for him internationally. It's a political problem for him domestically. The president has to make the case to the American people why this is in their interest to engage in these hostilities. I think the case is plain and can be made very effectively. But right now, that's not happening. And if that communications problem isn't corrected, Trump will have serious domestic political ramifications to face. I think the Israelis know exactly what they're doing. Their premier object is regime change, and it has been for some time. Bibi Netanyahu has been thinking about regime change in Iran longer than I have. And the United States knows that that's Israel's objective, and we are assisting them, as we should. We provided intelligence, which together with Israeli intelligence allowed them to carry out many of the strikes in the opening hours of the campaign, particularly the one that got the supreme leader. So it's pretty hard to argue that regime change isn't certainly one of the objectives of the two-country coalition that's engaged in this. I think Israel shares the other U.S. objectives too, but the key point, the logic behind this is to eliminate the nuclear weapons program, to eliminate Iran's support for terrorism, you have to eliminate the regime in power. If you don't do that, if you simply wound it and diminish its capacity, it will grow back, and in some period of time, we'll be right back where we were before this attack started.
Joining me again is Mohammed Al-Masri, Professor of Media Studies at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies, and Paul Musgrave, Associate Professor of Government at Georgetown University here in Qatar. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us, gentlemen. Mohammed, I want to ask you first. We've seen Iran carrying out attacks on Gulf nations. They've also been targeting specific economically important areas like the Ras Laffan oil refinery and various other areas around the Gulf. What kind of pressure do you think Gulf nations can bring on the United States? And would they feel obliged to do that under the circumstances?
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that this is an asymmetric war. Iran cannot fight the U.S. and Israel, and so what it's trying to do is make this very expensive, very costly, and very painful for everyone involved, whether they are direct party or direct in their view. And this has become painful for the Gulf countries, for Qatar, for Saudi Arabia, for the UAE, Bahrain, and other Gulf countries. And to answer your question, yeah, there is pressure that can be brought to bear by the Gulf countries. They do have a collective weight. They do have collective power. Let's not forget that Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia pledged almost $2 trillion as investments in the United States economy. That is something that they could dangle, particularly if this goes on, right? Then there are other things. I mean, there are other levers that we can pull. I think the question, becomes though, is the leverage that they have, or does the leverage that they have outweigh the leverage that Israel has?
Good morning, Miss Brenda.
Going forward, the relationship between the Gulf states and the U.S., because obviously they are good. They have played host to U.S. bases and U.S. troops and various other elements of U.S. Infrastructure, if you like. That dynamic has over the years worked extremely well, but now, of course, they're seeing a very different side to this. What do you think is the relationship going to be between Gulf states and the United States going forward?
Well, let's imagine that what comes out of the current conflict is a temporarily weakened but more hardline Iran.
I'm blessed. Blessed. Thank you for asking. How about yourself?
Threat to the energy, the infrastructure, the way of life here in the Gulf. And the Gulf states are strong, they're sovereign, but they will still require external security allies to help protect them and to help maintain their security. And in a sense, that means that there will still be a potentially major role for the United States. But there's going to have to be a lot of trust rebuilt, because all the work that Gulf leaders have done in order to cultivate ties, political, cultural, social, economic, with the United States, those are being tested. One thing I would add to this very great analysis is that in the Republican coalition and in the United States, this war is not popular. And the more that this
God
war
is good,
is
God is great.
Israeli government, the easier it is to begin to lobby against this and to begin to lobby for off-ramps and for something that preserves the relationship, preserves the foundation of a wider American role with a greater array of partners here.
There's been a variety of different interpretations of the relationships that the Gulf countries have had over the years with Iran, particularly. You mentioned trust there, Paul. Mohammed, this is perhaps a slightly naive question, given that we're only like 4 days into this conflict. We don't know when it's going to end. But at some point, let's assume that it does. Where does that leave Iran with regard to not just the US and the rest of the world, but its neighboring Gulf states?
I mean, it's going to be very tricky. I mean, it's going to be very tricky, and that's putting it lightly. I mean, think about this from the Qatari perspective, right? Qatar has actually had very warm relations when the Saudi-led Axis initiated a blockade against Qatar in 2017, it was Iran that was actually providing Qatar with a lot of aid and support, and that has been reciprocated at various points in time. And now you have Iran attacking. Right? This is a kind of it's going to be seen as a betrayal of trust. It's going to be very difficult to mend that relationship. It will take time and a lot of trust building. But Iran is going to be isolated, certainly from the Gulf countries for some time. This might change Gulf relations with Iran for a generation, perhaps.
Paul, we've heard that Benjamin Netanyahu certainly has an intention that there should be a regime change in Iran. The US says that that's one of its goals as well. Is there a scenario, do you think, in which the Gulf countries, the Gulf states, may have some influence over who eventually runs Iran?
Well, that's hypothetical. I'm not sure I want to get into, but that does point to some of the central political tensions here, which is the United States at the beginning was describing this as a regime change operation. Israel has continued to describe it forcefully in those terms. The United States has been ambivalent about this and increasingly ambivalent. And we talked earlier about Secretary of State Rubio's discussion about why the United States scuppered its negotiations with Iran and went into the war the way it did. Well, it was because of Israeli pressure to go through with the decapitation strike. Now, that's pushing on an open door. The Trump administration isn't being led by the nose here. They want to do something like this. But you do begin to see these divergences over what the United States and Israel want. For all that President Trump says that he's fine with this going on 4 or 5 weeks or even longer, let's be frank, that is not going to get more and more popular in the United States as the costs of this war mount in every direction. Instead, what I think you see is the United States seeking to get something that looks like a resolution, something that looks like a win, something that allows President Trump to keep those cost of living increases down. And in that sense, there would be an opening for the Gulf to begin to say, we need to bring this to a close. We need stability. But that could put them on the opposite side of a government that does not want stability in Iran, which sets up a future conflict.
Paul Motor, Mohammed Al-Masri, we appreciate it, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the conflict is starting to look to have consequences for the US stock market, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average falling nearly more than 1,000 points since the start of trading on Tuesday. Other major indices have also seen sharp declines, including the Nasdaq, the S&P 500, and the Russell 2000. Traders are feeling rapidly rising oil prices are going to put pressure on the entire global economy. And the turmoil in the markets has also hit Europe and Asia as the closure of the Strait of Hormuz means uncertainty for energy prices. South Korean regulators briefly halted trading after the benchmark Kospi index tumbled by as much as 6.4%. East Asian economies are highly dependent on imported gas and oil. European gas prices jumped another 30% on Tuesday to the highest level in 3 years, signaling some of the highest rises since Russia's attack on Ukraine. Kristen Salumi is joining me now live from New York. Talk to us about how the markets are going at the moment.
Yeah, markets have tumbled since the opening bell amid renewed concerns about the conflict in the Middle East and how long it might last. And we've seen oil prices rising here as well as a result. Now, on Monday, the markets did trend lower before recovering by the end of the day. They had pretty much expected the attack and priced it in. But since Monday, what we've seen happen is the head of the Revolutionary Guard in Iran threatening that any ships through the Strait of Hormuz could be set on fire. We've seen drone attacks in Riyadh. We've seen Hezbollah's attacks on Tel Aviv, all suggesting that this might not wrap up as quickly as investors had initially hoped. And President Trump himself has said now that the conflict could last 4 weeks or more. So what we saw happen at the opening bell today is the Dow Jones at one point down more than 1,200 points, or more than 2%. That's about 2.3%. Again, they have recovered slightly since then, but all of the major stock indices are now in negative territory. And this is across the board. It's technology stocks, banking stocks, industrials, all trading lower. We are seeing more money going into bonds, which is considered a safe haven when times are uncertain. So I think that just speaks to the questions and uncertainty going forward. While the United States is in a better position than other parts of the world to weather the increase in fuel costs coming from the Middle East, the concern again is if this is prolonged, it will have that wider impact on the economy and drive up prices more generally as it continues.
Bring us up to date with the markets there from New York. Kristen Sinemi, thank you very much indeed. There are ongoing strikes in Qatar, the UAE, and Kuwait. We're going to go back to Zain Basrawi in Doha. Just talk us through what you've been seeing and hearing from where you are, Zain.
Well, this morning began with a series of attacks across cities in the GCC, including Bahrain, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Riyadh, and here in Doha overnight. And for the rest of the day, it's been relatively quiet. Now, once again, we're hearing multiple loud explosions here in Doha. Presumably, those are explosions from interceptions of Iranian missiles and drones that have been striking Doha for several days now. Simultaneously, we're hearing reports of loud bangs heard in Dubai, as well as Kuwait, and loud explosions heard in Abu Dhabi as well. So what we are hearing or seeing seems to be a coordinated assault once again on GCC cities as far as part of Iran's retaliation for coming under attack.
From where you are, and I appreciate obviously you maybe can't talk about Dubai and the other cities which have been attacked just at the moment, but from what you're seeing in Dubai, is there any sort of sense amongst the people that there is a panic, or is life essentially carrying on as normally as it can be?
Well, this region is relatively no stranger to these kinds of conflicts. And in the past, in the 90s and the 80s, we've seen people once
Yes.
into mushroom, there was a desire for people to leave. The majority population in this part of the world.
Double tap. Hold on, y'all.
It seemed like it could go on for some time. People do look at trying to leave. So far, there's been no panic. Every government in the region have
Praise for our soldiers, man. We already got casualties.
Living there's food, water to sustain life here for the foreseeable future. That's something that every government has been messaging ever since this conflict began from day one. Nobody wants to see a panic. Nobody wants to see an exodus of the population. But the fact of the matter is, many people are now looking at trying to get out. We've seen this in Dubai, people wanting to leave. We've seen a resumption of some flights by the UAE to begin trying to restore international air travel. But the fact of the matter is, for the most part, skies remain closed, airspace remains closed, and it is still tenuous. While there is relative cost, these attacks, even if they go once or twice a day, even if they are low-level attacks that carry on for some time, that will become an existential crisis for people that have made their lives in this part of the world. We have a message from U.S. saying the Iranian regime is using mobile launchers to indiscriminately fire missiles in an attempt to inflict maximum harm across the region. U.S. forces are hunting these threats down, and without apology or hesitation, we are taking them out. That is the message coming from U.S. CENTCOM on their social media page. What I can tell you is that in the last few days, the profile of cities like Doha, cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi has shifted. Here in Doha, when you're standing here looking up at the skies, there is no commercial air traffic, which was a staple of the skyline in the city, seeing airplanes coming in and out of the international airport. Now it's been replaced with very few sightings of either a C-130 Hercules U.S. aircraft, which has been part of the security posture of the skies, or you'll see military helicopters doing sorties and doing sweeps to survey the area as part of the security apparatus that is functioning over the country now. But for the most part, at the moment, attacks like these that punctuate the day, that if what seems to be happening is the Iranians want to make sure they're in the morning with attacks like this and end the day with attacks like this as well. And as we've seen with multiple attacks simultaneously here in Dubai and Kuwait and Abu Dhabi, this does seem like a coordinated effort.
Zain Basrawi bringing us up to date there from Doha. Zain, thank you very much. Iran's been targeting American bases and other infrastructure across the Gulf countries. We're now getting a clearer picture of the extent of those strikes. Official figures from across the Gulf region indicate more than 1,830 Iranian missiles and drones have been intercepted since the start of the conflict 4 days ago. The UAE says its air defenses respond successfully intercepted 98 ballistic missiles, 3 cruise missiles.
Hey, can y'all still hear me? Let me know if y'all can hear me. Oh, good morning. How you doing? No problem. Oh, I already know. Trust me, I be understanding. I already be knowing. Not hey. Hey, I don't believe that I'm too far behind you in age. Honestly, I'm getting up the. I'm get. Huh? Okay, I appreciate you. How you feeling as far as pain and everything? Yeah. Right. 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 The only thing that I've ever broke was my arm, and that's what it was at a young age. I, I probably was like 9 or 8 years old. And that was, I don't know if you remember, I don't remember if you remember that story, but my grandma was giving me a whipping for pissing in the bed, and she picked me up. She didn't mean to slam me down, but for some odd reason she was picking me up. And well, when you're holding your kid's hand, and that they whipping them. Some people hold their kids' arms so they don't wiggle around, so you don't hit them in the wrong spot. And it was one of those things. She was whipping me, and somehow I slipped out her arm, and boom, and I didn't even know my arm was broke. Yes. And what I just a couple more questions. How's your son doing? Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah, I'll be right. Hmm. 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 Yeah, and you know what? I be paranoid too whenever my kids be complaining about like Caden. So we finding out that Caden be getting, well, he doesn't get as much as his mama. His mama been having migraines since a young age. But this is second time, I think it was about a week ago that Caden just out the blue caught a migraine, and his migraines be heavy, heavy, heavy. So I'm waiting on an appointment for him to get him checked out. He's not hurting right now, but that's a I mean, he cries all night. I mean, I gotta sit up with him when he do get it. Like I said, this is the second time he's got it. Yes, yes. Well, hmm, yes. Yeah, it's the sound for him too, the light and the sound. Like he don't want to hear nothing like when he's going through that. Okay. Right. Let me ask you this. What part of Texas you live in? Okay, okay. Okay, yeah, now because okay, yeah, now because I just want to check because I definitely want us to link up one day with the kids and do something like the zoo or aquarium or something like that. That'll be nice. For sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah, because right, exactly. Exactly, exactly. Yeah, we working on thing that sound good. That's perfect with that. We got enough time to, plan. With us, we gotta plan in advance with us. But yeah, we definitely gonna set up. I can't wait. I'm excited. For sure, for sure. Okay. Yeah, yeah, hey, Texas is long distance for me, period, because I come from New Orleans and New Orleans is real small. You could drive from one end of town to the next in 15 minutes. Yeah, yeah. Somebody told me I was looking for a certain store, and somebody told me it was round the corner, and they gave me the address, and it said 15 miles. I'm like, this is not round the corner. That's the whole of New Orleans for us. Seriously. Do you have a church that you go to, or you don't go to church? Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what? Yeah. Oh my goodness. Hey, and look, and since you saying that, I'm gonna say this last thing, but since you saying that, it's so weird. They have a pastor, I forgot what part of the world, what country he's in, but he shut down over 6,000 churches and mass because he says that they playing with people's faith. So he shut down all the churches just because of that, because everybody is seeing that like church has become a business. That's exactly what it is. But I appreciate you calling. Thank you for calling for sure. Yeah. Yeah, but let me tell you, you don't never have to apologize because let me tell you something. You are a great person, and I understand people have things going on with their life. Sometimes I don't make it to all my texts on time, and I do the same thing you do and call and then apologize. But I definitely understand. It's a lot that going on, even with family members, kids, and things like that. Yep. Okay, thank you. You have a great day. All right. Hey y'all, I'll be back live later. I'm about to go handle business. And I'll see y'all a little later this afternoon around 1 o'clock. My phone is about to die on this one. And I'll see y'all later. Have a good one. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless y'all.